Sleepy Bones Detective Agency, hurtling fleshwards towards the beating molten heart that is the screwball center of the earth. Only here can I forge the hottest goddamn Halloween special that Sean Evans has no part in. There he goes, sinking to the bottom of what remains of the Atlantic Ocean, along with the rest of Manhattan. I, the surreal Smithy Supreme, the glassblower of gross guff, the owner of a temporarily online-only boutique of spooktiques, will present to you 4 handcrafted, free-range curiosities which otherwise might take 3 to 5 days via courier. Ha-ha! It is complete! It's yet another Bone Zone Halloween half hour! I am so good! On time and everything this year, too. Careful you don't burn off your sideburns on this one, you fucking loser. I call it... Why, Miss Mummified Alive?
Date is April 19th. 5. Our specimen number 5B is cold prepped and tubed to the bones. We are sanitized, day dotted, and intending to complete 100% of steps beta, gamma, and delta before EOD. As we are more aware now than then, we have elected to ignore the protocol of alpha step, as it will render our new experiment null, void, and or moot. Specimens number 2A through 3A was my bad. Sorry about that. Final count then. Numbers are low, but that is to be expected with, this in play, you know. And we've got heaps of that stuff laying around until we're through to Zeta step, after which it should just sort of take care of itself. Okay, let's begin. 1 incision. Yep. Down the side of the belly. Oh, straight as you can manage, really. Yeah. Oh, don't mind the so much. That's probably normal in this sort of scenario. Yeah. Keep going. Yep. Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the bean. Will... Shit. Dropping on. Pump in the emulation fluid. CC's? Fuck if I know, love. Just fill her up, will ya? Yeah, on the tray, please. Apparently everything must come out in the correct order. If we're careful enough, we won't need... Oh, come on! Date is now, April 20th. 5. Specimen number 5B, as we've now decided, is in prime condition considering her earlier near miss. A tube end was pinched beneath somebody's foot, meaning one source of emulation fluid was not reaching a particularly important destination. Crisis averted. Forever. I can't believe how effective this goo is. I'm no doctor, not anymore. I had no idea how far we've truly come in such a short span. Yesterday's work is complete, as is the first of many waiting periods. So far, so good. Emulation is, successful to say the least, but can we really push it as far as we've been asked? My mouth waters in anticipation. Organs have been separated, dehydrated, and placed in the appropriate ash vats. Vats have been strapped to the requested platform, as has specimen number 5B. vitals, all things considered, pretty good that they're still green at all. For what should be far past a state of shock, there is still activity on that monitor. There's the occasional spike in pressure, the waves of a heavy sleeper. 5B does not move, though it's something in their, their thought wave seems to suggest an attempt at least. It is almost as if they are awake and listening. No, it's the fumes talking. Don't mind me. Spent too much time in the corpse room. We have, it's now April 21st, 5 technically. We have successfully replaced specimen number 5B's heart with the pacemaker thingy. An assistant attempted to leave the compound, and we've said that snag there. The pacemaker replicates the function of the heart. That's the pumping bit, as well as, I suppose, sort of resetting the emulation fluid in each cycle, in a way. Something like the lungs might do for the blood there. Only they're in a jar now. I mean, this is the furthest we've ever gotten. If this is successful, we'll all be free. Don't you see? It is, it's April 22nd, 5. So begins our descent. So begins the final furlough. So begins... That was literally the last of the coffee. Fuck! I have with me no more assistants. I don't agree with this policy. If things don't go to plan, sure. We have specimens number 6A through 6D, but we must be going through surgeons at this point. I mean, are there any left? It's all up to me now. Not that it's too difficult from here on out. So the organs are for ritualistic purposes and not scientific ones in place. Specimen 5B no longer requires intervention. I have rinsed inside with wine and herbs as per the recipe, and I have applied the traditional coffin of salt, layered beneath weighted sheets for desiccation. I await now the passing of the 40-day period, as in stasis our specimen 5B will dream, unaware of the horror, dead, but living in permanent nocturne. I can only hope that their dreams are cleaner than my own. Yeah. I hope. Yeah. I'm so sorry about all this. If anybody else would have done it, I reckon they'd have got them instead. You were very good, if that means anything to you now. It's a matter of necessity. It's better than the truth. Better than nothing at all, surely. You're just out. Look at the screen, I mean, something's still churning. I don't know why. I don't know what it is, I guess, but it's something. And that's better than nothing. You are our ticket to Avalon. You are the first resident of heaven on earth. There is no reason for you to leave. You... What was that? Impossible. Impossible. No. Irishman is aware, 100% aware, somehow, some combination of the emulation fluid, and sense is not there, it wasn't there for this. I be feeling everything, all at once, forever. It doesn't need to make sense. It needs to stop. This is not... This is not...
It is Tuesday.
7.
Oh, hold on. The tape is...
Fascinating stuff. But if the red-hot gushing of smelt and slag was not to your liking, we are far from the forge now. Pull up a chair, relax in the bar, and for fuck's sake use a coaster. Now, perhaps your salvation lies in one of these bottles. Allow me. Let's start with a double shot of restaurant-grade Briggs Brothers brand Bad Vibes. Then, 25ml of willingly donated cerebrospinal fluid, half a drop of swamp muck, a dash of grave robber's tonic, a cocktail sausage, and Angostura bitters to taste. Shake until frosty. Here! Suck down 4 fingers of this. It'll put hairs on your skeleton. I'm calling it Feast Your Bloody Eyes on This! In a canvas-textured, egg-white cushion of a room lies Randall Selwood. He is talking to himself. He sits upside down with his back on the floor, his legs on the bed, as if he has been wailed upon by the residents of the International Boxing Hall of Fame. His eyes are run raw, puffed closed, crusted over, and shadowed in wine spill stains of day-old blood. He is blind, though he was not born this way. In essence, Randall Selwood's mind has been shattered into a million dull, throb-purple shards. Having faced defeat after defeat, to near miss, to deserved accursedness, to wretchedness, then success, to crushing, overwhelmingly ultimate defeat, and then somehow to further failure from there. It is not a matter well understood by the quote-unquote proper authorities, but it is in their hands now, and they will watch for as long as they have to, and there is nothing that Mr. Selwood can do about it now. There is no question, this man's life story is the truth, and nothing but the dreadful truth. Those who were brought in to identify the blood-soaked banshee of a man did so with boxes of supporting documents and antiquated evidence. Randall Selwood disguised himself the best he could, but in his particular case, it was more than an uphill battle. It was a war fought against a reinforced concrete wall. He has walked further than any man in history. He has seen even beyond his years. And now, he is here, where he will die some 100 or so years from now, in constant suffering, and yet no peril, as he awaits an exclusive pocket of hell. Randall Selwood was born beneath a full moon, which lit the sky a deep, vampiric red, as if the devils themselves mocked the empty Christmas day unfolding beneath it. He had to be torn from his mother, kicking and screaming and holding on for quite the opposite of dear life. A sickly, weak, wet child whose skin was so thin that one could trace any circuit in his body back to its source. His bones were flexible, as though his mother's womb had been filled with vinegar. At the most delicate of touches, violent, pus-filled boils would amass beneath one's fingertips and weep tears of pestilence like swarms of swollen ticks. Much of his time was spent being tended to night and day by a woman whose name was believed to be Winifred, a maid, a servant to the once industrious family of Selwood. His memories of that time are worse for wear, but not gone. He recalls, in his empty state, being well off. In a miraculous moment of clarity, he supposes that a child so unfit for life would simply have perished had his loveless rearers had no coin to hand. Winifred sat with that child for years on end, toiling away with soaps and lathers for his pustules, providing wet cloths to douse his fevers, and feeding him his meals, which were swift and liquid-based at the best of times, and retroactively digested at the worst, through an invasive incision made to his stomach, which would be opened and sealed on an irregular basis. In the form of a deep flesh trench, Randall Selwood wears the evidence of this on his body. Confined from the moment he could first lift his own head, there was no miraculous recovery on Randall's horizon. Just a cold, inevitable corpse fit for no cart larger than a wheelbarrow. But it would not be long until his first incident, when he first established his own path in life. It occurred simultaneously with the exact moment he awoke to his sentience, what one might call their first memory, when they first truly took the reins of the breakable mass which surrounds them. For many, this occurs during the toddler stage, but Randall Selwood was in such a state of torpor and sickness that he did not truly wake until long after the uncelebrated 7th anniversary of his birth. It overwhelmed him, hit him harder than any of his ailments ever had in all of his life, as if coming to life had tried to strike him dead, a vendetta held by both since birth. Sweaty, dripping, screaming, he bolted upright, peeling himself from the blanket cocoon. Without realizing it, it was the first automatic movement he had made in an immeasurable span of time. He looked around, still betwixt fight and flight, as the mysterious pressure that had ruined his life thus far decompressed and fled. His eyes fell upon Winifred, who, mouth open in shock, met his eyes with astoundment. At immediate eye contact, a sensation struck them both like a misfire. Randall felt it hit him, struck him so hard he felt his eyeballs shift in his skull. Without a second passing, it spread straight to his chest and then out through the rest of his body like any other rash. It hurt him. In panic, he pushed backwards and buried himself in his bed once more by choice. Winifred did not move. She said nothing. She alerted nobody to this miracle. She said nothing for so long that the child, out of sheer curiosity, sat up once more. And then Winifred keeled over and began to vomit blood. It was thin and bright red, and it created a pool around her, which Randall simply watched, frozen in place. Confused, barely educated, Randall Selwood poked and prodded the woman until she stopped convulsing, until she rolled over and looked him dead in the eyes with her own bleeding, blackened orbs. He stood, shaking to his malnourished legs. and wailed until somebody came to help him. Winifred survived the ordeal. She was tended to at home first by the family doctor, who then took her by carriage to his own home practice. It was put down due to a lack of understanding shared even now to what he called a hysteric aneurysm. Winifred lived, but she was not the same. She seemed slower, less apt for conversation, unable to recall much of herself and her surroundings, episodes of complete confusion. She was left blind and sentenced to whittle her days away in a far-flung wing of the family's home, under the supervision of one whose name is long lost to the annals of forgetful time. Randall Selwood, however, had never been better. He was elated to be free from his prison of a bed, by coming to life by sacking off death. He had earned his body and it accepted him. He could not speak much, and he knew almost nothing, but he could take care of himself now. As if he had simply picked it up from watching Winifred work, Randall Selwood had little so much as an outbreak of boils. First, for as long as he kept up a regime of skincare and balms, and not much after that, he needed to do nothing at all. Furthermore, Randall was eventually placed into a school where he was tended to by a single master. He was, of course, by all standards, a shy child who never once made an effort to make eye contact. There was little to note as he grew, not until his 3rd year of education, and it was decided that he could take to lessons with other children, albeit ones several years younger than him. He found certain elements of schooling difficult. In particular, he appeared to have an inferior or rather non-existent short-term memory, as if nothing ever stuck. Now, as Randall Selwood rolls onto his front, his hands tied behind his back, high as a kite on some cacophony of name-brand elucidators, shot into the back of his neck by the who says who proper authorities, he recalls his second incident. A fogged, cracked and disrupted lens recalls a child, years younger than the body it possessed, being asked to read aloud from a Bible. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. As Randall sloughed his gaze around the room, some unordained magnetism ensured that his randomized wandering field of vision inevitably landed directly upon the penetrating stare of the teacher in question. For the remaining lines, a froward heart shall depart from me. I will not know a wicked person. Their stares were consciously welded to one another, unknowingly burning a hole deep within the other. When it came to an end, he appeared to be in a state of shock, as though the Bible had never been brought to such bright life, and that it was the wind from the lungs of Randall Selwood that had done it. A moment passed, and he awaited applause. The nameless teacher, forgotten by history bar the dead that had once witnessed this, opened his mouth to allow a pressurized split stream of thick red blood and oily bile, screamed and collapsed in on himself. He was pronounced dead at the scene, though he never received an official cause of death. By then, Randall Selwood knew that it was him. He had access to sudden information well beyond his years or his understanding. He knew the rest of Psalm 101. He knew much more than just that passage. He knew what preceded and followed it, though he did not recognize many of the words in his head. He knew of the whiskey bottle in the bottom drawer of the wooden desk, and he knew of the teacher's whole, unsaturated opinion of him in those final few moments of fear. Pitiful, a disfigured child of Incest, probably, or perhaps the result of wretched, ill-gotten luck. He even suspected the boy of cursing Winifred, as, supposedly, did much of the town. But why? Why did this happen? Could he control it? Why did it kill the teacher, but not Winifred? He needed to try it again, almost immediately. A thirst for information, one that would grow ravenous like a teratoma. A desire with teeth. Late at night, long after his parents had imbibed a quantity of brandy that could wash away the memory of France itself, Randall slipped through the kitchen window and wandered the vacant streets of his native home. His body disregarded the cold snap. Rather, he found himself to be much too hot, wrapped in a thick winter coat. Had he absorbed their vitality, alongside their intelligence? He left it on, bearing in mind its concealing properties, and stalked the street until he came upon a night watchman with an unlit torch. As he stands unsteadily to his feet, Randall Selwood remembers his first kill. Fit with fright and sweating, and coming up in a rash because of the sweating, Randall called upon the watchman's attention and began his darkest experiment. With his accursed stare, Randall burned into the man, and his expression did not change. He just started to sway, just a little, like a stopped clock just knocked. Frozen in place. Fear fell from Randall and was quickly replaced by a much greater anxiety. He wasn't just fooling himself, was he? What was that? Was that blood there? It rolled off his cheek and dropped to the ground. Randall Selwood's eyes were bleeding, right alongside the night watchman's. As soon as contact was broken, the night watchman fell to the ground as though his bones had been ejected backwards from his body in defense. His ungodly experiment had returned repeat results. If he held the stare for at least 1 minute, the victim would expel the contents of their body out from their mouths, bleed from the eyes, nose, and ears, collapse, and die, all in a moment, leaving with him their living legacy, memories, knowledge, thoughts. As far as he could tell, the night watchman was a blank slate. He knew nothing of use, but his mind was well stocked by the tragedy of war and the resulting forgottens. The horror of violence, how close one can be to death without actually touching it. Dead wife, dead child, pissing blood, coughing black. He felt it all at once. He keeled over himself and vomited the black bile of regret. All at once, he felt the weight of 3 stolen lives that not a soul could fence. This was no ability, it was a curse, and it could be used no longer. He did his best to keep his head down in all senses, permanently seeking small change and cigarette ends in the corners of the streets. He stole a pair of spectacles. The milk bottle thick lenses and thicker wooden frame obscured the upper realm of his vision and acted as a kind of literal shield against his unnatural powers. Never again, as he was, did the cursed child unintentionally harm another person. However, he did not remain abstinent forever after. The next time Randall Selwood looked a person in their eyes, he was 17 years old, and his mother was dying in her bed. It was clear that her fate was sealed from the very first cough. He had heard his father discussing it with a servant, but she suffered with it for much longer than necessary. She was more boned than anything else by the time he came face to face with her for the last time. She had not seen him once while she was bedridden, a mirror image reflecting his time of stasis. He, however, could not remember a time in her life when she had wanted to see him, and saw to it personally that he would be with her one last time before she died. One night, after he heard her cough, hack, swallow, gasp, die momentarily, then gasp again on return, bringing several devils back with her from hell, he decided that it was time to act. He headed into her chambers after she ceased her guttural death rattle dress rehearsal. Though he did not do it in stealth, she did not look at him. Did she know about his curse? And was it her fault? Was that why she could never bear to look in his direction? His mind, racing with all these infernal micro-conclusions, was so fat full to the brim that it was essentially blank. He waited, breathing in heavy tours, seemingly never needing to exhale. Eventually, she turned to face him, as though she had resigned herself to an easier death. He kept their eyes from meeting, hoping she might say something to him. It was an overreal moment where time came to a stop, and Randall Selwood became aware of his options. On one hand, he wanted his mother to live, but on the other, he wanted to put her out of her misery. Furthermore, and most importantly, he wanted to know. He wanted to understand why she did not love him. He placed his hands on her chin and tipped her head back. Reflexively, she looked him in the eyes with those sunken, sulfuric eggs, and from her he began to drain first her sight, then her soul. With her weaker disposition, his mother succumbed to the eye contact in mere seconds, though what Randall received was everything all at once. In his head, he could see what she had seen of him. He was her son. There was nothing more to it. He was her son, and she loved him. She couldn't bear the thought of losing another, and by the time he was well enough to walk, she could not bear to reattach. A clock somewhere in the room struck to attention, but Randall heard no bells. A servant, having noticed the door ajar, had entered the room. As he attempts to come to terms with his soft play future, Randall Selwood remembers that, from her scream alone, he knew that he was done for. Whether this servant knew of Winifred, or the teacher, or knew nothing but what she saw just then, word would get out, and rumors would overwhelm, and he would be slaughtered in the streets. He dashed, throwing himself through a convenient nearby window, a feared monster whose name would be whispered beneath street lamps for all of time. A beast plucked like a grape from the vine of Satan's ovary. He fled his native home and found nothing but ruin. No matter in which direction he trod, no matter where he attempted to set his sights on, Randall was hounded. The tail seemed to have legs much faster than his own. In gutters he hid, always aiming for the shore, for the sea, staying for as long as he could, time by dreadful time. He wished, sometimes every time, that the cold would take him, only to be hunted by those who carry flaming torches. In the briefest of windows where Randall was not chased, in his most unbroken of silences, he could not even work for a living, for he had no skills, no education. His warped body was not suited to help, let alone work. Under pressure, his bones seemed to bend backwards, and he had the stamina of a roast ham. Worst of all, his longest-standing suspicion had been proven true. Randall Selwood was unable to learn any information at all If it did not correspond to something he already knew, it would be lost to him. It only seemed to stick when it was ripped from the eyes of another. Therefore, he could learn no trades bar that of the night watchman or the teacher, both of which required him to remain in one place where he would be found, drawn, and quartered. As the months and months drew onto the years like stains across a single outfit, Randall survived on scraps and the shelter of sunset, his dreams haunted by the ghosts of those he'd stolen from, though they fled during his waking hours. He forgot them easily as he walked. It all became too much for him. The life on the run, the constant threat of murder by numbers, the complete inability to remember anything new unless it was stolen, and yet being morally obligated to never do so or face the penalty of internal, unending, unaging thought-rot guilt. No sleep, no food, dirty water in and out, bleeding gums, hectic craving. It won the first time he was asked a question, in a time swallowed by oil and long since fossilized. Only now remembered, as Randall Selwood is pinned down by white suits in his flaccid cot and force-fed wet nourishment. He broke hard, and he strummed like a guitar string, his ricochet wiping an entire coastal village off the map, leaving a gouge in the flesh of the earth paved over now with asphalt. He went through them one by one and took everything from them. He slept bloody and nude until the sunlight woke him and he saw what he had done. Even now, as he swallows beige muck from a piping bag, he cannot process this deed. Using his newfound knowledge, Randall set sail. Eventually, he faded into myth. Eventually, they forgot, or eventually, they died. Only the latter interested him, for he persevered. In fact, in quiet American anonymity, Randall Selwood hardly aged a day until he was 30 years old. By then, he owned a shipping empire. His dreams were still haunted, but his days were near pleasant. By the time he was 35, he had everything he could ever wish for, resigning himself to forever see-through sunglasses, to never know love, for he would outlive them. And, as upsetting as that might have been to a poor man, a rich man can fill any void. By the time he was 42, he was blind. Penance. He could not say he did not deserve it, and resigned himself into care once more. It had cost lives upon lives, but he had gotten what he wanted. He was content under the care of a butler named Christopher and his very well-paid team. He could live out the rest of his waking life in peace. He could do no harm now, though he still wore the glasses out of habit. Without his sight, Randall Selwood was left defenseless to his haunted mind. He was weak and ready now to be picked apart by his deeds. Infinite shrill. The voices returned en masse in the night, as if they had come together and joined forces against him. Every single one of them screaming and bleating and clawing at the inside of his head, pouring through his glands, spreading his innards across the room like gaudy floral wallpaper, and the agony just did not stop. Not when he woke, not after he ate, not when he was wheeled outside and left to burn in the sun with a coffee and a cigar. They kept at him. They were in now, and they would never let him out of their grasp. Randall Selwood gladly accepted this. And for many days, he hid his truth and remained cold-locked in his room alone until the first swell subsided. It was this, he thought. This was his penance, and he deserved this. His eyes would bleed, his skin would bruise, his bones would break, bite marks and scratches littered his body. A reminder that his shoplifted lifespan was not infinite, that he could die, and that he would die, and that he would be subject to the subjects of Satan in whatever circle of hell they'd have to build for him when his time came. It was the universe that decided that this punishment was not enough. That they could not build a hell too grand for a villain like Randall Selwood. On a morning when the screaming had quelled just a little, when he could almost hear the birds at the window, he was greeted with a coffee by a particularly chipper Christopher, and when the blind man turned his head to speak in the servant's direction, something miraculous, something horrific happened. He had not, in the first time in so many years, instinctively, reflexively put on his sunglasses, and his ability activated. Christopher slumped to the ground, and his feelings, his thoughts, his regrets flooded into Randall Selwood, bursting the dam of damaged flesh and crumbled grey cells, flushing together with every single other stream. As we know, as Randall Selwood knows himself, he broke once more. Having his sight, having the strange ability taken from him, his brain placed in a permanent stasis, unable to process new information, whilst being forced to suffer the constant remembrance of those deeds that earned him the very ability to cope. He broke, took in the staff that approached him, chased those who ran, chased them into the streets, took those who tried to stop him from doing that. They screamed before, during, and after. Right away they joined the horde, and that is what he wanted. He wanted to hear them all stop when he was shot, killed, beaten to death in the streets by somebody that was smart enough to shut their goddamn eyes when they swung for him. And somehow, he still ended up here, rotting under the careful stare of a glass window. Here, he would live for. How long? How long indeed? Deaf to all the world but the screaming in his head, and their pointed claws and gnashing teeth. I'd call that lunch, I think. Even disembodied voices need to partake. But what Halloween treats does the spine-chilling supermarket of scares have in store? Oh, fuck! Okay, that one actually got me. Let's see. Junji Ito Doritos. A bit easy, that one. A microwave wimpy burger. It says, "You've tried the rest, now try to ingest." How about some ice cream? They've got crookies and crime. Ah, this is the stuff. It's called Stairwell That Ends Well. Like the giant said to his wife as he fed her a warm mouthful of fresh out of the oven bread, "Careful, there might be bones in that." Fucking exams, bro, I said, annoyed and down the phone. Fucking exams. So no. That's what I'd told James, my flatmate, who is affectionately referred to as Johnny One Ball on account of the obvious. He'd asked if I was coming to First and Foremost, a club night they do at the Rose, but I had to tell him the truth. I'd been putting it off for far too long now. I was studying my actual ass off. I didn't realize that being an architect would be so fucking hard. To tell you the truth, I thought it was just making up buildings and having some other, preferably bigger cunt build it for you. Gotta say, for the first time in 4 years, I was super glad this university has a 24-hour library, but it is creepy as fuck in there. By the time I got off my phone, it was about 10:30 p.m. and my exam was at 9 o'clock sharp. I'm not a bad bloke. I was only on my phone because I assumed that I was the only one in there. Just me, on my Todd, reading through Matthew Trudeau and Hiromi Torikawa by sick green desk lamp, and not even sort of retaining either's words. As I'm repeating principles of construction over and over to myself in some vain attempt to make it muscle memory, somebody taps me on the shoulder. A girl, a woman about my age or slightly older. Must have been in her final year too, because she had the same eyes that I did. Deep, underscored, with the caffeine-soaked pupils that vibrate at some near-missable frequency. She had on a Vandals tee, and her backpack was Vans checkerboard, judging by the state of her shoes and the black smears that accentuated her fingerprints. She was probably an art student. Studying? She asked me, like it wasn't perfectly obvious or anything. She had one headphone in and one hanging down from the back of her ear, dressing her face like a thin white bandage. A strange, plodding funk stromped out of one of them, but the one that hung down was silent. Classic. Yeah, I told her, pausing the music that I was listening to, somewhat out of politeness, but also because I didn't want her to think that I was a loser. You? What is this? She said. Tinder? I blushed, and she slapped me on the shoulder. I'm kidding. No, haven't you heard? I stuck a hand behind my ear like an old man and turned my head. Silence. It was a library, after all. All I could hear was her tinny music, which had now switched pace altogether. I think it was Japanese now, but how would I know? She cocked her head at me. The stairs. It's gone viral. Dead viral. Obviously, I didn't know what she was fucking on about, so she enlightened me. Some dumb tip-top video from a chick who graduated about 2 years ago, who'd sworn she'd seen this all herself, right? If you leave the library in the new building, turn right, scan your card, ignore the elevators, turn right again, you'll find a set of stairs that lead to the old building. There's a couple of media labs, the toilets for this block, and the top floor houses the photography darkroom. Supposedly, they're cursed, right? If you cross on the stairs at exactly 00:00:00, dead on midnight, something strange happens. That's it, I said. Just something strange? Sure, she said with a smile. Wanna try? I am weak. Direct hit, my blood pressure spikes. I am head over heels already. I compose myself and shrug. I have a lot of work to do still. But even as I'm explaining myself, I'm looking at that clock. She takes my first answer without judgment and leaves me to my studying with a smile. She absconds further into the library, in the direction away from where my desk is facing, so I lose sight of her in its labyrinthian obscurity. I got back to it, ignoring the missed opportunity for friendship tugging at my fluttering heart. I managed to memorize the names of at least 3 architects and decided to celebrate by going for a smoke outside. Like an idiot, though, I left my goddamn student card inside and had to call the security bloke to let me back in, which he was not happy about. Took about 30 fucking minutes to get him there too. Like he's doing anything else back there, probably just smacking off or something. After showing the dude my card, backpack, and work in progress, to which he shuddered a little bit, he left me to my own devices. Then, The 8 machine coffees I'd had seemed to kick in all at once, and I had to hit the johns soon, or I'd end up pissing and shitting all over myself. I grabbed my card, took the stairs, and did my business. Only the toilet wouldn't flush, I couldn't get the door unlocked again, and when I'd finally gotten back to the bottom of the stairs, I realized I'd left my phone this time, cause clearly, I'm a fucking idiot, right? I get back up the stairs, grab my phone, and my stomach absolutely drops out of my asshole. I see at the top of the screen the time, 11:57 p.m. I'm a pretty big baby dude. You can tell me anything, and as long as it's dark, or I'm high, or we're alone, my stupid lizard brain will agree with the premise 100%. So, there I was, just absolutely cacking my jorts, trying to hawk my way down this horrible, hardly lit hallway, speeding down the stairwell that ends, well, with her face. She was standing there, about halfway down, arms outstretched, completely blocking my path. She told me she wouldn't move until the clock had ticked through 2 more minutes, 1 more minute, 35 more seconds. And then we were allowed to move on. I was actually trying not to sweat on her, and gravitationally, I was not in a position to do so. But I definitely saw a bead fall from between my eyebrows and land right between her filthy sneakers. At 000000, an alarm rang out on her phone. It was, for whatever reason, the sound of a duck quacking over and over, which pumped a whole new fear into me, for reasons that I literally cannot fucking explain. And then we started to move. I gave in to my stupid caveman instincts and literally begged her to stop. I took several steps backwards and even threatened to throw her down the goddamn stairs, not that I would've. But it was all completely useless against this suddenly shredded skate rat. She stepped right on by me and then stopped just 2 steps ahead. Then she burst out laughing at me. "Should have seen your face," she said, giving it all the gab. I was as red as a beef tomato when we parted ways. I went down to return to my completely ineffective studying stratagem, and she went upstairs for her own personal reasons. But I went as pale as the linoleum under my trainers when I realized what was happening to me. I was only on an infinite fucking staircase. I just kept going around and around, dude. I'd only been on the 3rd floor, and the building went from ground to level 4. There wasn't any more down to go to. Out of sheer curiosity, I just kept following it until the room itself told me to stop. I got scared, dude. I'm not shitting you here, okay? I swear to God that I saw the skin start to peel off my goddamn fingertips, so I quick turned and fucking legged it back up those stairs. Wouldn't you believe it? Guess who I saw? I mean, I saw her backpack first, but she was sitting right next to it with her head in her hands. I don't think she was crying at that point, probably just proper embarrassed in it. "It goes on forever," she said, pointing backwards with her thumb. "But it doesn't repeat, I checked." I said, "It does the same downstairs." And then, because I was feeling pretty sore about the whole thing, I said, "Happy now?" Yeah, right, that's when she started crying. It was before I'd even finished my sentence. I tried to catch the insensitive bit at the end, the butt of the sentence, but I missed it, and it clacked on the ground at my feet. I spotted the little wet stain that the bead of sweat had made earlier, 2 steps down from exactly where we'd crossed in the middle. Now, call it subconscious genius or something better, but I fucking knew that would be important. Now, obviously, I'm telling you this story, so I'm gonna cut and chop it a bit. This really happened, I'm just thinking it out on the fly. I'm gonna leave out the bit where we sort of yammered and moaned for 45 whole minutes about how it was entirely her fault though, and that neither of us knew what to do about it, and I'll just skip to the end of it all and say that we decided amicably and together to mark the exact point at which we crossed with the backpack and made our moves to go downstairs. I wasn't looking when I first went down, not really. But she was right, you know. It didn't ever take us back to the backpack. It just seemed that there actually was a completely identical set of stairs beneath every previous set of stairs. There's no real doors anywhere. The elevators are there, but the buttons don't work, and the doors are glued shut. They get hotter as you go down, too hot to touch. There are no windows either, but there's definitely a breeze that definitely carries a sicky sort of smell on it. Each set of stairs had 13 steps, then an L-shaped landing, followed by 13 more steps. We went down 15 flights before our skin started to hurt. She stopped, but I wanted to push it. I wanted to know what happened. Ah shit, I should have said that I told her to stay put like a big man. No, I'm trying to be honest here. You believe me, right? Anyway, I went down 5 more steps, and 3 of my fingers undid themselves like corsets, peeled themselves like fucking bananas and spat blood onto the ground. Then I babied out. As soon as I'd climbed back up those stairs, my fingers resealed themselves, though the scars were visible, and they were a lot paler on account of the blood loss. I don't think I ever got that back. I explained what had happened, and she said that that was a no-go, and no shit, I agreed. This time, she took the lead. I don't know whether it was something that was happening in her head, like growth or whatever, or if, like, and this is kind of how I felt in retrospect, there was a kind of implied time limit, what with it being dependent on midnight. It was like a heaviness, like a gravity in the air. Does that make sense? Whatever it was, she seemed a bit more like the weird chick that had wanted to do this in the first place, instead of a bit of a buzzkill. I wasn't happy about it. I made it pretty fucking clear that I didn't want to be involved. But what am I gonna do? Sit around and die of old age on some stairs? That's not me, dude. After we'd climbed the first few flights, we both started to feel a little warmer. I hadn't noticed so much, but she did. She had this theory about it, that if going up was going somewhere, and going down was going somewhere else, then the middle might not have been based on where we met, but like at the actual top of the building, like the peak of the 4th floor stairwell where in real life it stops. I didn't know what to think about that, so I just kept quiet. She was wrong though, in retrospect, but I'd love to know why she was wrong, you know? We went up and up for ages, like a really long time. I lost count of the flights after a little while, but it did seem to literally go on forever without ever changing once, and also nothing fucking weird happened to us. I touched the elevators and all. Once they weren't hot anymore, they just stayed at identical temperatures on every flight. We just kept going until I literally couldn't take it anymore. I mean, she'd have given Mo Farah a run for his money. I was bright red, again, huffing and puffing, chomping on a cigarette because there weren't any fire alarms in the secret stairwell. I managed to convince her that it was doing us no favors, and we took a break to think about the egg and cress sandwich Casey had put in her backpack several hours ago. That was her name, Casey. That was when she told me. I wasn't super hungry, and I'd never seen cress before, but it seemed like a good idea to go and grab it in case a little fucking goblin came running out to grab it. What? Who knows? It's a magic fucking stairwell. Anyway, I was in the middle of saying all that to Casey, and she straight up shushed me. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me. I've got a kid sister and that. Also, she was doing it for a good fucking reason. Yeah, that's right. Footsteps, dude. We could hear these thumping, great big, huge footsteps coming from way, way up the stairs. We started moving the minute we heard it, knowing that there really was only so far we could go. Each step sounded louder, even though we were significantly ahead of whoever it was, and whatever it was they were dragging behind them. Casey broke into a run, completely panicking, and I chased after her, screaming for her to stop, You could hear the steps over my yelling, no word of a lie. I saw the backpack come into view, knowing how close we'd been to the skin-stripping atmosphere of the lower floors, and grabbed at the back of her shirt like a cat might, choking and yanking her backwards onto the hard steps. I heard her tailbone crack as she landed with an oof. I stepped away, fearing retaliation. She got up on her own, but I think she was scared stiff by that point. I don't want to sound like I was super chill or anything, but I did just kind of accept what had happened, you know? I mean, are you listening? There was literally no escape, up or down. To be quite honest with you, I mostly just wanted to see what the fuck it was at this point. Not like her, scared out of her mind, even though it was her idea. No shame, mind you. I felt really bad for her. I wanted to get us out, but like, it was time to give up. I guess she just made a mistake, you know? Should have known better. I looked it up afterwards. I'm telling you the fucking story. That's more than I got. I mean, that person, the one who put the video on TikTok, went fucking missing. It was pretty clearly real, dude. Anyway, I stood there just sort of waiting for whatever the fuck it was, dragging an axe down the stairs to cut me in half or whatever. I started to see the feet turning the corner, and Jesus W.H. Bush, she fucking bolted, mate. Like a greyhound, lost her mind. I chased after her, but only for the first few flights. She wasn't listening. She wasn't even there anymore. She was all fear. She went with such force that I don't even think she saw what was happening to her. She tripped at the top of one flight, and by the time she had hit the ground, her entire body had been degloved and ribboned. I turned away just as some invisible force tugged the Casey strips even further into the shredding depths. I just started moving again because that looked like fucking agony. That looked almost worse than what that big cunt might do with the axe. I just stood there, shaking like a shitting dog, mentally chaining myself to a meet in the middle situation, a few steps ahead of her backpack, the last evidence of her that remained. I just waited, dude. I just wanted to know what it was by that point. It was an axe, alright. The sharp end grinding on the floor. Must have been 10 feet tall in all, I reckon. At the ground, the source of the echo was a pair of black and iron booted feet. I could see them as they were if I focused on them, but if I started to draw my gaze away up towards the sort of knee-crotch area, they'd split and shift like shadows and lose all their hard edges. If I locked onto the chest, I could see huge slops in shades of green and brown and indigo all warping together, sometimes forming cloth in the corners, other times writhing flesh like one of those grimy old 80s flicks. Let's cut the shit. You and I both know that I would never in a million years be able to look that goddamn thing in the eye, or eyes. Yeah, I might be playing it cool in the story, but nobody has ever exaggerated this much before in all of time, okay? I caved, dude. I absolutely took a step backwards, fully willing to be eviscerated by a bad vibe or whatever was happening down there over getting diced by fucking Davy Jones. I stepped backwards and I tripped over her fucking backpack. I took a tumble, dude, hit my head, smack, bam, broke the vertebrae or something, hence the brace, but they found me, dude. Which means I know the trick, dude. I cracked the code. I solved the puzzle. Look, I have her backpack right here. Let's go back there, tonight, yeah? You and me, dude. We've got to get this on camera. You trust me, right? Right, dude. As we wind the show down for the final tale of interest, we, the Sleepy Bones Detective Agency, would like to reaffirm that we are anti-NFT, anti-AI, anti-computers all together. Yeah, that's right, all of this whole thing, I wrote this on a motorized typewriter, hooked up to a stove that only burns through 6 bags of coal in an hour. It is so smoky in my office now. What's this next one called? Yes. It's Making Mountains Out of Anthills. You are a bartender. You have been working in a restaurant and not a bar for 6 months now. A restaurant hard flung out of Cardiff, nearly accessible only by train. Population negligible at best. It is by far the worst job you have ever had. Not the job itself, because you hardly have to do anything considering the amount of customers, though it certainly isn't fulfilling. And hey, after all, before this, you worked in a 2-floor venue, and then a 3-floor nightclub, where police raids were regular, and the days off were not. Also, that one guy died when he fell off the balcony. Your occupational malaise is not even caused by the people, who mostly keep to themselves, as though they worked in a library and not a semi-Mexican joint. No, it is the building itself that causes you distress. It was once an infant school. It is cold, like how you remember it. You can tell, too, from the listed internal structure that where your bar sits was once a kind of assembly hall, where hymns and things would happen, and kids would all respond monotonously in the wee hours of the morning, something like, "Good morning, Miss Whatever. Good morning, everyone." Now the hardwood floor has been pulled out, and a glass washer plumbed in. The main issue here is that it holds all of the issues that a built in the late 1800s, used till the late 1900s school building is plagued with. The kind of stuff that you notice at that age. Stinks of wet paper all the time, even over the waft of stewed beef. It is deeply haunted by something, judging by the sounds it makes when you are flicking off the lights at night. And it is, without a shadow of a doubt, within all insectoid lore, the property of bugs. It was termites first, because none of the wood had been touched in about 100 years. Then, it was fruit flies and fungus gnats, so many that you could hear them hovering above the taps like thin rain on single glazing glass. You had to tell the customers that it was speaker static, faulty wire, that sort of thing. Now, it is a colony of ants. A parade of them greet you at the beginning of every day, leaving their homes from the cracks in the brickwork, across the pumps and the post-mix guns, along the spirit shelves, and even in the syrups themselves. You spot the thick, green kiwi syrup, sitting in its spot, lid still on tight, full of floating seeds, some still wriggling, completing the facsimile immediately before you toss it in the trash. It has been 6 months. The cocaine trail of ant killer, which, illegally mind you, trails the outer edge of your workspace, has done nothing but move them upwards into your sight line. They're in the porers, they're on the glassware, they've eaten the fruit slices. You've been doing your best, frankly, but it is starting to weigh on you a little. You're way past mad. When it first happened, you told them that it was bad news, and they said they'd tell someone. Then, 6 months passed, and you said, "What's the plan with the ants then?" all out of the blue. And you were looking for a concrete, "Yeah, sorry, we're getting the killers in tonight." You squish another ant beneath your index finger, a reflex at this point. You get back a wet, gluey answer of, "Nothing. Wait them out." Wait them out? They're ants, not squatters. It's already their property. You suppose that, basically, you're expected to deal with it with your own 2 hands. You crush another ant. You crush another ant and get on with it. You crush another ant and pour 4 Pepsis. There are ants in the pipes. You tell them you're out of Pepsi. At least you can see the ants floating in lemonade. You crush another ant and do nothing, really, because nobody in Ustred fancies a Mexican tonight. You crush another ant and you crush another ant. You drown a few in Thatcher's gold, because that's gotta be a better way to go. Can ants get drunk? You crush another ant and you crush another ant and you crush another ant and you hesitate. You've always been told that they're not really alive, not actually sentient, like little computers whizzing around. You can kill them. People make that their entire careers and we don't get too mad at them, right? Insignificant. But they are alive. Don't finish them off. Just crush them halfway or whatever, and they glitch out, flail, spin, the non-verbal screaming. They're not important, sure, but how many ant lives equate a cat, or a dog, or something like that, or a person? And all of a sudden, you can't bring yourself to do it. You let one ant live. The bar manager crushes an ant while he's trying to explain his new menu concept, and a little bit of you dies instead. You make no drinks. That's the 3rd day running that nobody's come in, and you're starting to think it's a kind of front. You see an ant. You leave it be. You see an ant. You see an ant and pick it up. You pick it up and you place it outside when you're having a cigarette. 1,000,000 more take its place. You don't know what to do anymore. You can't see the bar for ants. And yet you feel as though you personally have slaughtered 1,000,000 of them. It all adds up. They are all living creatures at the end of the day. And if all living creatures are equal, then you are technically a killer. You know it's a silly train of thought, but it occupies your entire person for every second that you are in front of them. Every time you see one, and they're on the walls and everything, you think of the squish, the pop, the crunch beneath your finger pad. How quick is it really? There's no guarantee that it's pain-free or quick or anything. Sure, you might get the whole thing beneath your finger, press hard to break the exoskeleton, and smear it into smithereens, but is any death truly instant? Is it really? Do you know that? You kill no more ants. In fact, you stop other people from attempting to kill them. It gains you no friends, but you are compelled. A customer asks why there are so many ants. You say, "I don't know where else to put them." An ant looks at you. Or at least, you think it does. Something clicks. At the end of your shift, you wait. The manager on duty leaves, says, "The door's locked, just make sure it's shut properly, and turn off all the lights, since you're the last one to leave." You drop to your knees and claw at the shelves, hunt behind the glass washer, peel back the back bar, and find the queen. You do not show up to work the next day. Nobody worries. You get one call. Your boss crushes an ant. You do not go into work for another, and another, and another day on day on day. Your boss notices there are no more ants. You get a text message. It goes unread. You see ants. All you see is ants, and then nothing. A month goes by. Work never chooses to investigate. It's only when the ceiling falls through on a neighbor downstairs and their apartment is swarmed with ants and their filth that somebody knocks on your door. You take no notice, or you don't notice. Either or is true. For what they find is dirt and moss and gunk and goo, and you wrapped up in it, body and soul. A cocoon. Preserved food, cured meat. And in your place are the ants and their queen, living in a 24 square foot ant farm that you have built over the course of a week. An officer crushes an ant, and they all turn to face him.
Check your vitals, pal. You've just been exposed to a lethal dose of vitamin scare. You may experience vertigo, motion sickness, the belief you are a mouse, and sudden acquisition of 3 new GCSEs in punching, kicking, and swearing. You have been listening to yet another Bone Zone Halloween half hour, and I have been your hostess with the mostess, Jake Lucy. A $40 steak in a $230 cup holder, still wet, fresh out of the bog look, pockets full of stone crabs. I can sniff out bad vibes, love, and you stink. This audio zine was produced for the Sleepy Bones Detective Agency and is copyright 2022. All resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental, but I am willing to sell out at the drop of a hat, so don't let that stop you. If you enjoyed this show, you might like helping it grow. Think of it like a fungus, and the hospitable environment is you giving me money on either patreon.com/SBDA or Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/sleepybones. You can also find us on Spotify and YouTube, as well as on our home turf at sleepybones.agency, or at my day job, where I'm getting my PhD, my permanent hankering for donuts. Until then, go to bed, watch the 1998 Cosgrove Hall adaptation of Terry Pratchett's soul music, and remember that you either die funny or you live long enough to be a big whiny baby in your twilight years like John Cleese. Have a good night.